This video was funded by Transnational, an Advanced European Research Council grant. Let's play a guessing game and see if you can get to the right answer. Imagine a Western European country with 4 political parties. Old school conservatives and socialists from long ago, a Green Party founded in the 1980s, and a relatively recent brand of nationalist party. You meet 2 young people from this country, Violet and Peter. Violet is studying to become a high school art teacher. Peter is undergoing vocational training to become a car mechanic. Now, which parties do you expect Violet and Peter will vote for in the next election? Without looking at other people's comments, pause the video and type your guess into the comments below. I'll wait. Now, let's find out the right answer. Welcome to Catch the Eye Politics, where we explain how European politics really work. From what we know about Violet and Peter, they're about twice as likely as the average person to vote Green and Nationalist, respectively. Chances are that many of you were able to guess this correctly. Somehow it just feels right. But why is that? How could it be so easy to guess someone's voting behavior despite knowing so little about them? It's not like the Greens are the party of art teachers and the Nationalists are an alliance of car mechanics. And neither Violet nor Peter are only voting according to their own best interests. In their jobs, Violet and Peter will probably both earn roughly the same amount of money and should have similar economic concerns. So they should both be voting for the same party. This way of thinking about voting behavior is called rational choice theory. In a nutshell, rational choice theory says that people will always vote for the party they believe will do what's most beneficial to them personally, usually in economic terms. Some rational choice theorists like to think of voters and candidates as points in a multidimensional space. Where you land in this space depends on your political and economic interests in different areas. According to this spatial theory, voters will choose the candidate closest to them in the coordinate system. But as we've seen, that's not what's happening with Violet and Peter. In fact, it's hard to imagine them even voting for the same party. So there must be a better explanation. Another way to understand voting behavior is to look at the bigger picture. What is happening in society at large that gives new parties a chance to grow? A classic example would be the Industrial Revolution, which split society into owners on the one side and workers on the other. Each of these groups have strongly opposing interests. Owners want to generate more profit, while workers want higher wages and labor protections. In Violet and Peter's country, this disagreement is what produced the conservatives on the one hand and the socialists on the other. This way of thinking about political parties as the product of societal divides goes back to a paper from 1967 and is called cleavage theory.
No, not that kind of cleavage.
A cleavage is a major and lasting shock to the fabric of society that motivates opposition to the status quo by groups whose lives are affected in ways that are difficult or impossible for them to escape. According to cleavage theory, voters are not just points in a coordinate system. They are real people with identities defined by hard-to-change characteristics like gender and education. In this view, citizens don't really care all that much about politics and aren't exactly rational in their voting decisions. At least not economically rational. But they know who they are, what they work as, and which way their friends and colleagues lean. So the basic idea behind cleavage theory is that party system change stems from, well, cleavages. The division between owners and workers is the class cleavage. But there are also cleavages between religious and secular voters, cities and rural communities, and those who live in the center of a country versus those who don't. All of these rifts are the result of societal shifts that began in the 18th and 19th century, and they have shaped European politics ever since. But what about the Greens and the Nationalists? Where do they fit in? Well, Violet and Peter certainly aren't the only ones who like them. In this chart, you can see the total share of national election votes going to these new parties in 5 EU countries. As you can tell, they've been on the rise across Western Europe for at least the past 10 years. And if you've been watching the news lately, you might have noticed how much they're still growing. Especially nationalist parties have been gaining ground all around Europe, sometimes even joining governments. But why? This is where we have to turn to newer research. Namely, a recent paper by Lisbeth Hoge and Gary Marks. Their argument goes like this. Roughly 40 years ago, with the emergence of modern computers, knowledge started becoming the key to economic productivity. Work shifted from the hand to the brain. It's the information revolution.
Around the world, the information revolution is changing the nature of what people do and how they do it.
3 such changes are worth highlighting here. First, suddenly it was your education that determined your chances in life, not your physical abilities or your family's social status. Unsurprisingly, college degrees started becoming all the rage right around that time. Second, this created a divide between fields that are directly useful to the industrial economy, like business, engineering, and computer science, and those that aren't, like the humanities, arts, and most social science. Can confirm. Third, and this is huge, women were now able to do at least as well as men in school and in the labor market, so the gender roles of the past were suddenly outdated. In fact, post-secondary education rates are higher among women across most of Europe. Ironically, many women chose those industrially useless fields of study that promote critical thinking, so they became skeptical of the very social order that made their emancipation possible in the first place. And naturally, they got fed up with patriarchism and glass ceilings. That's the paradox of the information revolution. More knowledge can set you free, but it also makes you aware of how unfree you still are. Violet could tell you all about that. And that, kids, is where green parties come from. We will come back to this later, but first we have to talk about what happened next. International organizations, automation, offshoring, trade, immigration, globalization. If you're a doctor or a lawyer, this won't have hurt you much. In fact, it's made traveling and working abroad easier than ever. But it's much less fun if you're a welder or a miner. Over the past 30 years, things have been getting worse, not better, for blue-collar workers. They now make less money, are less respected, and have to worry about being replaced by a robot or much cheaper labor in East Asia. Realizing that can be very painful, especially if you like things the way they were before. Just ask Peter. Adding insult to injury, many of these women are now making more money than these men, or might even be their boss.
Imagine that.
On top of all that, men are now expected to help with the housework that women used to do alone, like cleaning, cooking, and babysitting. If you have old-fashioned values and think that the job of a real man is to put bread on the table, then this new reality can be pretty upsetting. And that, kids, is where nationalist parties come from. So to sum it up, it's smart women with a bright future ahead of them on one side, and male blue-collar workers on the social decline on the other side.
Now that's cleavage material.
The reason why it's so easy to guess who Violet and Peter will vote for is because they're perfect examples of the two sides of a new cleavage created by the information revolution. The transnational cleavage. Transnational because this new cleavage is all about rethinking or defending national borders. Women like Violet embrace open societies, cultural diversity, and international organizations like the European Union. Men like Peter see these things as a threat to their national community and their way of life. But it's not just your gender and level of education that make you more likely to vote green or nationalist. It's what you studied too. This is a pretty novel idea. Most existing research doesn't consider people's specific field of education and occupation. But think about how differently engineers and natural scientists think about the world from, say, historians or therapists. It only makes sense that they would have different political views too. And it's not just because they were taught to think that way. Remember your former classmates from school? Some of them were destined to go into programming, right? And others were born to be writers or artists. They were always going to be that type of person. And of course, once a person has started down a certain path, they will mostly be around classmates and colleagues with similar views, which will only strengthen them in their own opinions. As a car mechanic, Peter is going to be surrounded by other likely nationalist voters, while Violet will be around lots of green-leaning teachers. Echo chambers, anyone? All of this is not just theoretical. Let's look at the data. This chart shows how many people voted Green or Nationalist between 2012 and 2018, according to the European Social Survey. Here's how much of the total population voted Green on average. And here's the average for nationalist parties. As you can see, it was a pretty similar ratio. Now let's break this down by specific occupations. Take scientists, for example. At 22.6%, their average was almost 13 points higher than the overall population. In other words, scientists are way more likely to vote Green than your regular Joe. The same goes for arts designers, social workers, and teachers. Now compare that to metal workers. At 4.9%, they were almost half as likely to vote for a Green Party as the average person. Security officers, including police and prison guards, construction workers, and extraction workers like miners had even lower Green voting rates. All in all, scientists were 10 times as likely to vote Green as miners. The opposite picture emerges when we look at nationalist voting rates. These are way lower than average for scientists, arts designers, social workers, and teachers. Meanwhile, metal workers, construction workers, security officers, and extraction workers are among the biggest supporters of nationalist parties. So, what makes teachers so different from construction workers? Well, it's all about their training. To understand this, let's split education into 4 main areas of focus. Students in cultural fields primarily learn about history, art, reading, and writing. Economic fields pay more attention to management, accounting, commerce, and law. Communicative fields put emphasis on presentation skills, social psychology, teaching, and, well, communication. Finally, students in technical fields are trained in machinery use, automation, test procedures, and math. The transnational cleavage runs along this line, separating students in cultural communicative fields like social studies and teaching from those getting economic technical training like in agriculture or engineering. Let's see if this hypothesis holds up. First off, a disclaimer. Unfortunately, the European Social Survey has stopped asking respondents about their field of education, so the data in this paper comes from 2004 to 2008, a time when nationalist and Green parties were much weaker than they are today. That said, the data is drawn from 13 countries and the results were confirmed in a US survey this year. So let's go ahead. This chart shows 115 jobs and where they fall along our educational continuum. The bigger the bubble, the more of these professionals were included in the survey. And the farther to the right, the more cultural communicative the field, from car mechanics like Peter to high school teachers like Violet. Now let's look at what share of each occupation voted Green. The trend is clear. The more it relies on cultural communicative skills, the more a field tends to lean Green. High school teachers like Violet, for example, were about twice as likely to vote for Green parties as the average person. This effect is even stronger for teachers in special education, but librarians and writers are also among the Green core voter base. We can do the same exercise for nationalist voting rates. Here's how many people voted for these parties on average. And here's what share of each profession picked them. Again, you can't miss it. People who have lower cultural communicative and higher economic technical skills were much more prone to voting nationalist. Mechanics like Peter were about twice as likely to vote for nationalist parties as the average person. Same goes for drivers, welders, and farmers. What do all of these professions have in common? They're dominated by men. Here are some of the strongest examples for occupations that lean Green or nationalist, like kindergarten teachers, physicists, or truck drivers, and the share of women in each. As you can see, the more female a field is, the more Green voters it tends to have, and vice versa. More men mean more nationalists. Again, women like Violet vote Green, and men like Peter vote nationalist. Let's recap. Everything started with the Information Revolution. Work shifted from the hand to the brain, so higher education became key, although some fields are more useful for the industrial economy than others. And women quickly overtook men at university. Because many women chose industrially useless fields of study, they became skeptical of capitalism and the patriarchy. This led to the rise of green parties, who fight for environmental protection, gender equality, and minority rights. And while women with cultural communicative skills were taking the world by storm, men with economic technical training were losing status thanks to globalization. This led to the creation of nationalist parties, who rally against immigration, societal change, and international organizations. This green nationalist divide is made stronger by echo chambers that split men and women into different occupational worlds. Put all of this together and you get the transnational cleavage. So far, so good. But at this point, we have to wonder why establishment parties, like the conservatives and socialists in our example, are having such a hard time convincing people like Violet and Peter to vote for them. I mean, it worked on their parents. Peter and Violet's parents are old school. Peter Sr. has voted for the socialists all his life. He works in a factory and is a member of a big labor union. Violet's mom prefers the conservatives. She's a math teacher and a proud wife. Their lives have been defined by the same cleavages that allowed parties like the socialists and conservatives to dominate European politics for most of the 20th century. Violet and Peter are not like that. What do they care about tradition and class solidarity? They worry about globalization and climate change and artificial intelligence. Big political parties are like oil tankers. Once they have set course, it's hard to change direction. That's where new parties come in. They're like sailboats. They can go wherever the wind is blowing. That's why green and nationalist parties are able to capitalize so much on the transnational cleavage, while the establishment parties are struggling to keep up. So, what next? Well, if the class cleavage is anything to go by, then the transnational cleavage may eventually dissolve. Today, the voters of socialist and conservative parties, for example, are not as dramatically different as they were back in the day. Over time, the same could happen to green and nationalist parties, gradually blurring the lines between the two. In this scenario, Violet and Peter might end up voting for the same party after all. Or maybe artificial intelligence like ChatGPT will disrupt the knowledge economy like automation did for industrial production. Then women like Violet might join men like Peter in wanting to go back to the way things used to be. But whether we like it or not, green and nationalist parties are here to stay, because globalization and climate change are not going away anytime soon. The question is how much bigger they'll get, and whether establishment parties can keep up with them.
If you want to learn more about the transnational cleavage, you can find our sources in the description, including the paper this video is based on. That's it for this video. Please hit like if you liked it, subscribe if you want more, and leave a comment below if you've got some thoughts to share. And as always, keep your eyes open.